Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. On this Friday, very rainy day, glad to see everybody with us. I want to call to order the August 5th meeting of the Student Achievement and District Instructional Performance Committee. And I will call the roll. Mr. Craig?
Here.
Ms. Jones is here, of course, and we have one member who is out today. So we do have a quorum, and we will continue with the agenda as stated. For those of you who are here as part of the hearing of the public, we welcome our audience, first of all, and those of you who are here, we do have people in the room who have acknowledged that they want to speak in hearing of the public. We also may have people in our audience who listening virtually who may want, and we will, once we open it up to our virtual audience, if you will just click on the icon, which icon is it? Raise your hand. And then we will let you in to speak. So as always, my goal is to make sure that we have a robust and productive discussion, but also to get us out of here at 3:30. So, and I try to work hard on that. So we'll go ahead and get started. We will have a curriculum adoption request, Shakita Butler.
It's my understanding that Superintendent Wright will be to brief us on the curriculum adoption, so I don't know if you want to skip this.
Yes.
item.
Why don't we defer that until she gets here? Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so we'll move on. Graduation update and audits.
Am I on here?
Yes.
I am?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Last time I was struggling with that, so didn't want to call that out in the beginning. So I just want to take a moment and thank the board for hearing the update on the graduation component rating. And a lot of this on this presentation is information, sharing out the ins and outs behind the graduation component on the report card. Dr. Blaze will be joining me. I know she's coming in under fire right now, so she'll be joining us momentarily, but you have the printout in front of you if anyone needs one. I do have an extra copy I can share with you later. So starting off with the graduation component, the first here is our timeline, and this is current year, the fiscal year 22. We do call the school year the year that it ends. So it's the graduation year. We call that fiscal year 22. These are our the timeline for, that's okay, our class that just graduated. And what the timeline shows is starting in March of that graduation year, the 2022 year, that's when ODE releases the graduation cohorts. And we will have the cohort for the 4-year, they call it the 4-year 22, the 5-year 21, and then it goes down the 3-year 23, and the last year numbers are there. So in March, we get the cohort data. This is when we start working with our high schools on their on-track graduation cohort. In May, we have our spring graduations. August, the summer graduations. October of 22 of the current year, that's a big time for us. Our graduation rate for cohort 2021 is then publicly reported on the report card. So this year in October of 22, we will have the actual numbers for the previous year. Graduation cohort component is a year behind on the report card. So this data is new. So the published for the report card 22, we'll see 21. October 13th, 2022 is when our submission window closes for our current graduates that graduate in May or August of this present year. That's when the window closes that we submit the data. We validate data and work with our schools and our staff to ensure that we have reported good data. October 28th, 2022 is when our appeal window closes. We get an extra 2 weeks added on to that time frame to add in 2 different appeals. We have a first appeal that just is a data appeal if there's anything that doesn't look right. And then the second appeal is a new appeal, and it's new as of 2 years ago, where we can appeal cohorts. And that's new from the federal guidelines. Then I just have definitions listed here, what a fiscal year is. That's the, we call it our FY9. That is the fiscal year that a student enters 9th grade, and that is when their cohort is set. So that's a big information piece. That's when, from that point on, we have that entire year to make sure that we have nailed that cohort year, and we report that correctly. Cohort is the graduation year determined by ODE, identified when a student enters 9th grade and accountable to the report card. And then A graduate is when the student completes those requirements from the department as well. So this is our preliminary, unofficial information.
Say it 3 more times. 3 more times.
Yes, it is. So on March 4th, Dr. Blaze reported to SAC these numbers. The number of students in the cohort were 2,355. Currently, for this number, we have 2,320. The number up there, that 2,298, will be the cohort number we are proposing after the appeals. We have a number of appeals, students that have entered and were put in at their 9th grade year in an incorrect cohort, or whatever year they came into the district. Their cohort year was set erroneously. And it could be just by a student, an example, an EL student has come in from out of country and we've not received their transcript, so we have not been able to ascertain the correct data to put them in the accurate cohort. So a large number of those students are what we appeal, that situation that I just described. So 1,531 is the number of on-track students in March 4th that we had based on the February 15th data. Confirmed as of August 3rd, we have 1,832 of our confirmed graduates, and that is accurate coding. We have on the March 4th report 1,757 that were expected to graduate with additional interventions. That's not in addition to that 1,531. It was inclusive. And then going further down, 293 were additional students needing to meet graduation to meet the goal of 87%. So on the other side, we have 77 students that were over our intervention goal that met graduation requirements, and we have 167 of additional students needing to meet the goal of 87%. So I did have a caveat there, or the addition after the October appeals for that 2298. That's the big number, that's the denominator number, so that's what determines. We also have 483 students that are under review, and we're reviewing their graduation pathway to ensure that all requirements were met. So this is a list that comes back from ODE that they say something doesn't look the way it should. So, and most often we have, and that includes, that 483 includes students that have left the district and not sought education elsewhere. And they have basically become what we would define as a dropout. And so we are still responsible for those students. So the next slide, cohort factors. And this is, this information here, what we've included, you can, yeah. So when we look at a graduation class, when we look at when they cross the stage, and we look at in this school year, the 21-22 school year, we had 1,908 students cross the stage or meet graduation requirements. That does not mean they are in the cohort of the FY22. So of that 1,908 students that graduated by the end of May of 2022, 1,770 students graduated from that actual cohort, the 4-year 22 cohort. So that leaves us with 99 students that graduated from the 21 cohort and beyond. And then if you look further down, you'll see 39 of that 1,908 are early grads. They'll be in the FY23, 24 cohort. They graduated early, but they crossed the stage. We have 45 known summer graduates. That final number will be confirmed by October 2022 because our staff just came back into the buildings on October 1, so they're coding that as they graduate and when we get that information in. So we're validating that data. We have 296 students under graduation pathway review, which I shared earlier. And then this is just the data report from ODE. The submission window currently open. We are validating and reporting to the department. This is a give and take. We submit data. We submit about 8 records to them, and we do it probably about 3 times a week, and we get the information back, seen, and there's business rules applied, and we work on this until all the way to the close, which is the end of October. So we have our trends here. This is, again, unofficial, preliminary data. The hard line that you see, this is taken from the secure data center that we have from the Department of Education, Ohio Department of Education. The dotted line right there on the end is where we are presently with the numbers that we have that change each time we report, so they fluctuate. But if you look at the class of 2020, we did put something there. This is inclusive of the pandemic exemption. In the FY20 year, the requirements for graduation were changed. The legislation opened if students were on track to graduate, they were a graduate. So that 82.3% is a high number, but that is under that legislation change. The pre-pandemic, the 2019, is 79.4. And we currently sit, including the appeals, unofficially at that last number there, which is over where we were pre-pandemic, but we are not closed and that number is subject to change. I know I'm saying that a lot. You know I don't always like to give the grade numbers early. Okay, so if we go forward, this is something I wanted to bring to the board's attention. This year we have a new component rating. As we know, the report card last year changed from grade letters to stars. The difference here is not just in the stars, but the percentage of what equates to 1 star, which we looked at in previous years as what would be considered an F. And so those numbers have raised, and what they were 21 and beyond, an F was 0 to 78.9. 1 star is now less than 84, so it's 84.9. 83.9 and below is 1 star, so they changed drastically. We did have different component ratings for the 4-year and the 5-year rate. The 5-year rate is what it takes when a student was in a 4-year cohort and they took the 5-year. We still get that grade for a 5-year rate. That was a little bit lower, but still doesn't meet where we stand now on that table. And that table is for the 4 and 5-year. It's just 1 rating. We do have on the state report card what is called the composite score for our graduation rate, and it is made up of the 4-year and the 5-year. It's a weighted rate. The 4-year is 60% of that composite score, and the 5-year rate is 40%. And that would be your composite score, and that will be on the report card coming out. And that's where we're at. Do you have any questions, or if I can help you out with any of this information?
Okay. We'll open up for questions. I have several. Mr. Craig, do you have?
Yeah, just a couple here, and just better understanding kind of where we are sitting. I know when we talked before, the goal was kind of trying to increase that number from where we were.
Absolutely.
People were on track and get people towards graduation, and so where are we sitting as far as, is this moving in the direction we wanted to move? Is this moving in the steps that we were expecting from that conversation then?
I think there's still a lot of work to do, and there are still many factors to the graduation component, in addition to the requirements, the work that's done at the school level, and then the different factors that come in. Our different schools that have high population of English learners and resources put in place for them, the work that is surrounding just ensuring that the coding and the information coming out to the schools is accurate. There are a lot of moving parts to coding a graduate, and so that's where my team comes in, and we work with the schools and the counselors and the registrars to ensure that coding is accurate. And then aside from resources in the building, I know Dr. Blaze can speak to that. There's a lot of work surrounding that I can get back to you on that, or Dr. Blaze can be in and focus on that as well. I do see the trend is going up. We do see that at the 79.7, and we've not closed out yet. So we can update you on those as well.
Yeah.
It's on.
It's on. Okay, great. So I think to your point, there is a lot of work that we've been doing with the team to really look at how we're strategically thinking about a few things. One of them, of course, is the way that we are ensuring data integrity and data quality from the onset, because the team has spent a lot of time trying to clean up information that's input at a school level. And I don't think sometimes when we think about the start date for a 9th grade student, you really have to be cognizant of whether or not that is truly their cohort or not their cohort. I think that's one. The second is continuing to work with schools around coursework, the type of coursework the students are taking, and the monitoring that happens with that prior to them getting to their 12th grade year. And so in really improving, and you all have heard me talk quite a bit about systems, but improving our monitoring systems so that early on we're able to start with, this is the cohort, these are the courses that they need, this is how many more courses they need, this is how they're going to use, CTE, for example, to help augment the graduation area. And then really working with schools to make sure that they have the level of training that they need to work specifically with the students, ensuring that students know this is their progression, but also that there's monitoring and consistent monitoring along the way. So I think one of the greatest things that we really have to do is make sure that the data is in a format that's user friendly enough that it can be monitored across the board.
Just one other question to that, and I guess is really attaching to that point is the adjustment for the cohort. Is that done on a continuous basis then, or is that done at different stopping points?
So there are different stopping points. We monitor student data throughout the year. This is one of the pieces that we have a couple of fall safes in place with our SIS, with our student information system, and other reports that come out. So if we see new students coming into the cohort, we pull that data and try to work with the schools to say, is this student, does it match an age? Does it match a grade level? Does this look right? And we have a couple of things in place that will catch that. And then we run a report regularly, see who is new to the cohort, who's new in the 9th grade, are they coded correctly? And then we run that against the state database, which is ODEX. It's an Ohio database. And we cross-referenced with that database as well to ensure we've accurately caught that. And then also if there's a discrepancy, working with other districts to make sure that we have that. And in that whole school year, so this fiscal year 23, anyone that comes in the 9th grade, we have the entire school year to make sure that that's correct. But that's not a lot of time.
No.
Okay. Okay. Before the presentation, I had started reading this and started documenting some questions, but you answered a lot of those. But I do want to thank you, because I remember when this was presented a few months ago, and I remember saying, we want to see the good, bad, and the ugly. Okay. And there are parts of this which just don't look good. And I think trying to understand all of the factors involved with this continues to be a challenge for me, and I appreciate that you all are willing to come in and talk about this stuff. So I hear very clear that this is a preliminary, and we look forward to getting the final data so that we can really start asking those specific questions. Absolutely. But I do want to, I have a couple of comments and or a couple of questions. So the number under the 2021-22 preliminary data, where you have 1,832 confirmed graduates as of August 3rd, does that include summer school?
It does not.
It does not. Okay. So if you, and I don't know, you can tell me if.
There may be, I apologize, there may be a few that we caught in there at the beginning because there was still August 1, 2, and 3, and we do superstars in the schools that code right when they get back to make sure. So we did catch some of them, but we do not have all of them, and we know that because we've already looked at the trend and pulled all the schools to see who we need to work with.
Okay. So in that particular update, like you gave, so in those particular numbers, there's a difference of 466 students. So what I'm hearing you say in your presentation, that 466, there are a number of factors that are involved for those kids.
Correct.
But some of these numbers will be represented in the final data. So that number, we hope, will decrease.
We want that, the 400 we want to decrease. Yes.
Exactly.
And we want the 1,800 to increase.
Okay.
Yes. But along the way, the denominator could change, which changes the game as well.
Okay. Gotcha. All right. And then the one thing, so I think I want to say I look forward to seeing the final piece too. And I know the superintendent is also working hard on that. She reminds us of that all the time.
And we work extensively with counselors. We know each student, and if we find out, we have counselors that will look to see where students have gone, trying to find numbers if they've gone, because if they go out of state, they can come off of our cohort. Yeah. If they go to a program that is a degree-seeking program, there's a lot of factors that we can really work with that. Yeah. And the knowledge of that, when it gets into the counselor's hands, is really powerful because then they know.
Yeah, I think also when it's presented again to us, I think there are two things that I heard you talk about that I think is very important to communicate. And I say that because as board members, we aren't there in your offices and don't understand the numbers quite as well as you
Right.
do. But when we're out in the community, this is what people say. You guys been getting an F for this many years. F. That's all they hear. So it would help us if we could sufficiently respond to in straightforward language that our community understands that what factors impact this and what's being done to improve. Those are very concrete things that I think we as board members just need to be prepared. Because I don't want to go, I have found myself not knowing how to respond when people say, why are you all keep getting this? I don't want to hear that, but that's the reality that we deal with. But
Absolutely.
I appreciate this information. I know we have work to do, and I think, again, we look forward to it, but I would add those two things. We just want to know more about the specifics on the factors that impact the scores and then what's being done in the schools. And you touched on that a little bit today.
And that'll be one when we do that one. I'll do that one because
Yes,
that'll go
okay.
along with overall
Yes,
strategy
I get
across
that.
the district.
Yes, wonderful. Yes.
Before you go on to the next thing, I was on the state committee when they were redoing the report card, and many of these same issues came up. But one of the things on the coding, like.
Can you hear her? Can you speak into that mic? Thank you.
So I was on the state committee for when they were redoing the report card with ODE and the state superintendent. And one of the things that we were talking about is attendance. For those students who did not graduate, do you have anything flagged on what their attendance was? Because so I'm sure that those go hand in hand because before a student drops out, they have attendance issues. And how can we address that with the public on a campaign that we must have all kids in school every day so that we can have graduates?
Yes.
But then we have this growing population of students who are ESL, who are coming in as newcomers and they're not accompanied. How long do they have before they count, and have those all been coded back before they have to go on our graduation rates?
So once they enroll in our school, they enter the grad rate and the cohort. So
I thought that they had an exception.
there's new language surrounding our, once they get matriculated into the building, but I think it's 10 days. 10 days from when we enroll them and they start, once we start, that clock starts ticking for them.
Because that was one of the things that on the graduation committee, on the report card committee, that was one of the things that we really heavily talked about, is giving them that exemption for, I think it was 2 or 3 years.
I think.
Oh, you mean for them to count on the actual, for the grade? Depending on their status and their EL status, and I will get back to you on that breakdown for you.
Because that EL status can really impact us drastically if it's not coded correctly.
Yeah, what I'm gonna say, I think what I hear Ms. Sellers saying is similar to what I'm saying in terms of that's an impact factor.
Absolutely.
And I think you're on point with that, and I would like to see them incorporate those kinds of things and I'm sure you'd be willing to hear, other comments and even the feedback around that. But that's exactly those factors that we need to think about when they're giving us this information.
And then of the graduates from this past year, how many of them were impacted because of the issues around transportation?
Okay.
Because I know that impacted a lot of
It
students.
did, and we had students that were traveling across the city, and it impacted.
They said, I'm not going to school. We did that cohort with some of them.
That's a good point. Thank you.
But those are 3 things that Carolyn, as a board member, I would suggest that we talk about. And the number of students that we have who have an IEP who are by law entitled to remain in school until their 22nd birthday, because that number is sometimes a large number, and they may be students who are in that group because they count against us on our graduation.
And they do count against the cohorts, so the 4 and the 5 year, if they defer their diploma. It is delineated on the report card now, that number, but it's still counted in the calculation.
And that is something I think that we need, if we do a one-pager around graduation, and if we can talk about those 4 issues, I think that people, when I talk to people and I bring that up, they're like, oh, wow, why does that count? I'm like, because we have crazy legislators.
So Ms. Sellers has identified like 4 items.
Absolutely.
And I think what we're looking for is a comprehensive, any factor that could impact those numbers. I think we're interested in hearing.
And we'll put that
about
down
any
because
intervention
that's
for
exactly the work that we do at the school
Right,
level,
right.
identifying that so they know what resources they can use and
Yeah.
what is actually going to count for and against them. And the deferred diploma is very difficult because it's a double-edged sword. We want our students that can defer to stay with us to get the skills that they need to go forward.
Right.
However, it will impact us negatively on the report card. And the same with the attendance. HB 410 was a policy that was enacted, and we then have to keep our students on our books because we're accountable to them. And if they don't go to another school district, we still remain accountable to them, and we cannot take them off of our enrollment until we follow certain procedures, which again is the same kind of situation. It's a double-edged sword.
Thank you. And I do want to say this, I think the added one, I think that we just kind of took for granted was I think we need to know more. So thank you. Okay. Anything else then on that presentation? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
We look forward to seeing you in October. Or
Absolutely.
sometime thereabout. Okay. All right, so the superintendent is here, so maybe we can do the number 1 item, curriculum adoption request.
Yes, so understand this is a bit of a new process to me in terms of the request for the curriculum coming through the committee. So want to make sure that we cover it. I do have all of the team here so that as we move forward, we're moving forward with the expectation from what was shared before. So I think the first would be the world languages curriculum. So previously the team came to the Student Achievement Committee and presented a proposal that was a 2-year proposal around world languages. And essentially it's focused on really how we are intensifying our focus on world languages across the district. And that proposal was approved at that time. And so what's happened up until this point is there's been our teachers have worked together to really co-write the curriculum that they will be using so that it's across the board, the same curriculum. Also, the resources that have been selected are the same, such that if you're, regardless of what school you're in, if you're in a Spanish class in our district, you're getting the same resources, the same lessons, and then using the same resources, regardless to which school you're in. So that's moving forward. Starting in the fall, which was already approved by the committee, but starting in the fall, there will be a pilot that was approved. So the initial set of resources, if somebody could close that door, the initial set of resources are resources that are being piloted at school. So before we actually come and say, or before we start a purchase of the overall resources, we're trying them out, if you will, in a piloted situation, such that by December, even though the money has already been requested for this particular project, by December, we'll know specifically which resources we're planning to purchase to move forward, whether we're going in the direction of, yes, these are the resources that we thought were a good idea, so these are the ones we're going to use, or we need to back up and readjust so that we determine which resources are next. So that's where we are in terms of world languages, and it's moving forward as anticipated. The first set of dollars have been already, we've started the encumbering process for those, and then by December, we'll be able to provide an update in terms of whether or not we're moving forward. But the ask was currently done in ESSER already for this fiscal year.
Okay, so are you saying that this has already tentatively been approved by the full board? But the world language.
The adoption process has. So I think the request was, or based on what the team was when they saw the ask to come back, it was to approve the extension, which was then looking at the year 2 focus. So the first part has already been, the proposal has already been approved, and the funding for this particular proposal has been approved as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because I think what happened, the 3 of us who comprise this committee are new to this committee.
Okay.
And it appeared that we were approving curriculums, and then there was a follow-up where it came back to committee. So there was a little confusion about the cycle, and it's nobody's fault. It just happened that way. So thank you. I think the question around that has been answered, and that is it's already been approved, and this is an update on where we are with the year 2 of that approval.
Well, yes, so I would say the 0.5, because we
Okay.
still have to go up through December as we're looking at the piloted products,
Okay.
and then the extension for what to do next into that year 2 phase.
Okay, great.
Did I get all that right? All right, great. Okay, the next one is that fine for that one, because the other one is Montessori. So the next is Montessori, and as we know, we currently have 2 Montessori high schools. Both of our Montessori high schools are already accredited, if you will. And then we have 6 Montessori elementary schools. So the team has already started really doing work around alignment within Montessori. So this part of the ask was to initiate an adoption, what we're calling an adoption process, but it's really more about the continued alignment of the resources that are used across our district in our Montessori programs. Essentially, when the curriculum was adopted, the current curriculum was adopted, whatever schools were using, which was different in every one of the schools based on what I understand, whatever the schools were using was removed and the new curriculum was replaced. They replaced the previous curriculum. In some instances, when you're thinking about Montessori, the tenets that go along with that and what that work looks like, it's not necessarily an either or, it becomes a both and. So what are the additional resources that allows you to still be within the world of Montessori and understand what that alignment looks like? So there's been a lot of work that's already been done. Xavier is one of the partners that's done the work. I think EPM was the other one for a high school. What's the name of it? CM STEP for the high schools, but really it's about making sure that there is alignment, again, from our lens of equity across all of our programs that are Montessori. The principals are working together. They were already working together. They will continue to be in the same cohort for this year. So again, outside of the high schools, the elementaries are in the same cohort so that they'll be able to continue that work and do that with the voice of leadership and with teachers around the resources that need to go along with that process and the accreditation for Montessori. So that's what this one is about.
No.
Okay, so again, I'm trying to think very concretely here in terms of what you guys are giving us an update on where that is. Doesn't sound like there is any action that needs to be taken by the full board at this time. So we're not recommending anything except continuing the curriculum that was adopted, and the update just gave us additional information on where. Is that correct?
Correct, because we will likely come back after we
Yes.
continue going through the research process, if you will, and the alignment process. But there is not an ask. The ask is just to start the process of of what's called an adoption. But adoption might be a bit misleading because it's not really an adoption. It's more of a process that will then allow us to purchase resources that will support our Montessorians in the classroom.
Gotcha. And so I would recommend that at the point where these pilots are completed, we have a sense of what direction, what our final direction is, whatever. If it's coming back to us, if it needs to come back to the board as a request, that it comes to the committee first, if that's what's needed. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Yes, ma'am.
Am I on?
You're on.
Okay. I'm very excited about the way that the councils have been engaged in the work and the Montessori put together a cohort. Just want to ask the district leadership that as we move forward, I've already talked to the teacher leaders about this, have a communication plan for engaging teachers at large in those areas, because it's not just the people who show up at the council meeting who need to be involved at this work sooner than later, so that we can hear from a larger body. So just looking at that communication plan, because I think the way the superintendent just described it is something that would be beneficial for teachers to hear, that it is not a typical adoption like we have done before, and to truly understand what we are entering into. I'm interested in hearing more of the details as well.
Okay. So noted. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So if we're ready to move on to the next topic, Okay, number 4, update on the alternative assessment for students with significant cognitive disabilities.
Hey, thank you for having me here today. I did create a one-pager that you have in front of you that goes through just the alternate assessment and what it is for the state of Ohio. It is designed for students with significant cognitive disabilities. Back in 2015, ESSA came out and it limited the number of students that have significant cognitive disabilities to be tested to 1% for the entire state of Ohio. As a district, we were closer to about 4% as a district. So one of the things we looked at was where are we with those? What are the numbers? Why are we at 4%? Why is it so high? The state itself was approximately closer to 9%. And the challenge was the Department of Education could withhold Title I Part A funding if we didn't come down as a state down to closer to 1%. The students are tested the same grade levels, rate as their typical peers, and I have the chart there for you. Back in 2019, 2020, we started looking at the eligibility categories for students who were alternately assessed. We did a deeper dive, and one of the things we found were there were eligibility categories, not just cognitive disability or multiple disabilities. There were other eligibility categories that waved a little flag for us, saying a student with speech only, for example, on an alternate assessment. Not that that's not impossible for that to be, but that would be rare. So we took a deeper dive and looked into that, and what we discovered is we ended up right-sizing students who truly would be on alternative assessment versus those students who really needed to be in the core with their typical peers. We looked at a decision-making tool and brought that together. And then Ohio finally came out with their new alternative assessment decision-making tool back in 2020. And we, as a district, implemented that and also started training our staff on that. What we found was the new alternate assessment participation tool that the state had created matched what we were doing when we took that deeper dive to understand students who really truly should be on alternate assessment and those that we need to support more in the core.
Cindy, did you want to add to that?
I think this is just definitely in alignment. We actually had our, I'll say war room for not having a better choice of words, but our academic data review this morning with the team. So we talked about much of the same during that time. To continue to monitor our students, I think we went from about 4% of our students that were on alternate assessment, which is slightly higher than what you would expect in a district of our size with the number of special needs students that we have. So right now we're at about 2%. And so we'll continue to monitor that in that area and look at how we support our students that don't need the alternate assessment, because what you see is students that that need to be on a regular assessment. They are going to score in the exceeding levels on the alternate assessment. So that essentially, that's not necessarily what we're looking to see. That means that we need to get them on the assessment that's appropriate for them. And so it does go through the monitoring that we do.
Craig, do you have any questions?
Not a question, but I guess more of a statement to this one. And I think that I think with the amount of resources that we have to at times put into assessing how our students will perform and what additional needs they require, I think right-sizing it is a great way of also addressing the specifics of what our students are doing. And to your point, if you have a student who has certain needs throughout their time in the class, but don't necessarily need to be in the alternative assessment, we need to be addressing that separate from kind of measuring them measuring them with a tool that is not necessarily geared towards those specific needs. So I appreciate you all taking the time to think about that and focus around that for our students.
I think it's important that, and I appreciate and applaud the work of the team, because I also think it's important that we work in partnership with teachers. When we're electing the assessment that has to happen, there are if-then statements, right? There's a decision tree process that you go through in determining whether or not a student is best served on an alternative assessment or not. And so going in, doing the review with that, I think the team and working with the teachers have done a good job with that. And it's an area that we'll continue to monitor.
I don't have any specific questions, and I thank you too for the update. I really appreciate that. One of the things that I'm looking forward to, and I know, and I'm happy that the superintendent came today because we have communicated with her, and I'm saying this to the people sitting at this table as well as our public, that we are very clear and we are all in agreement that there are lots of things that we have to sort of, I don't know if tighten up is the word, but really do a better job in communicating about and reporting on and all of that. And so I'm grateful around that because I think we will have very different questions once we all get in alignment with where we are and where we need to go. And so I don't have any other questions. I'm just grateful that we did. And I know our other member did ask some very specific questions last time. So I don't know if she's listening in or whatever. I doubt it. She has something to do.
Right.
But we will make sure that in our report, and if she has questions, she can come ask us about it. But we are, I think, on the path to really getting at the information that we really need to really impact our performance in those areas. So I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm going to do the one for the teacher pipeline. I have them. In
Okay, well then you might as well just stay. For
I'll
this
just
one.
stay. I'm staying. I'm not leaving. I actually rerouted the team so they could do the closing so that I could be here since it was since I know how much you wanted me here today. So you want me to teach pipeline? Yeah, I'll do that one. Okay, so I think that this is just an update for the teacher pipeline. So we know that we have our teacher pipeline pretty much right now where it's servicing our paraprofessionals that are looking to go into the teaching profession. We have 3 different tracks for that. And right now in the system, there has been some attrition. So we have 3 that are actually in teaching assignments right now. There is a lot of opportunity. We started with 35 participants. There has been attrition in talking to, there are about 14 of those participants that have exited the system already, and the 3 did successfully complete the program. So in talking to the team, there's a lot of opportunity here. And I think that as we move into this year, we will definitely be we'll start by looking at those, and which is one of the tracks, but by those that have their bachelor's degree already. And how we're able to work with them and even work with them. My recommendation even is working with them if there is a process for a faster track that we can work with them to utilize them so that they're able to move into the classrooms much faster, especially if they already have their degree.
Trying to think how to formulate the question. Do you have any questions about the teacher?
Well, I guess just the one is that, so with the 35, I think you said who initially entered, so 14 have now exited that particular track. So that remains then the 20 or so that are still in the.
Yeah, so if we think about the process in terms of success rate, and if we use success rate as those that successfully completed the program as of May, there were about 9% that actually did that. So that's how we get to that number of 3. So the others, there are 18 that were still in the program as of 2022, as of May. And there's been some attrition with those as well. So it's really an opportunity for us to do a comprehensive reset at this point. Where we are right now in the process is the beginning of the application process. Identifying the individuals has already been done, the ones that have their degree already. That's the first group, but there are also 2 other groups with that as well. So going through a reset and a revamp with it, knowing that we just started it in 2021. So there's a lot of opportunity to make sure that the word is out, because I do think that that there is just more that we need to do in-house to make sure that our paraprofessionals actually know that this is an option. It's a viable option for them. There's some funding that goes along with it. And so, and we need them, in classrooms as well as for our teachers, especially. That's what they're looking to do.
And I think the other thought from my end is just also, are we having the conversation with those folks who did not complete as to those challenges, so that as we go for the next group, we're able to address some of those challenges.
Find out why, absolutely. And so what I do not have yet are the exit surveys for those that did not complete the program, but that's one of the questions for the team. And so our director that's overseeing that She also has some additional recommendations just for some things that she saw within the program that we could do differently. So taking that feedback, adding that to augment it so that as we move forward this year, we have, a greater success rate than 9%.
Okay, so my question, thank you for the information regarding our internal pipeline. My question is more to do with the external pipeline. Just if you have a sense of what our status is in terms of hiring teachers and where are they coming from, and what I'm thinking about is when we had the staff shortage, and we have a shortage all over the country with teachers and stuff. Just some idea of what that pipeline.
Yeah, so what I think the best way for me to share it right now, based on the work that I've been able to do with our HR team, is we really have to work on more intentionality around the way that we're looking around at those pipeline programs. So currently, the vast majority of our teachers come from the region. Because we are, the highest paid in the area, the vast majority come from the region. As a result of that, which is a positive, but there are also a lot of other opportunities. So mostly when we think about the way that we've been recruiting as an organization, it's really been through recruitment fairs. So we know that with the recruitment fair, the individuals have to then select and come to us. We have not, and some of that I think was impacted by COVID because a lot of the, a lot of locations that would otherwise have these really large teacher fairs, many of them stopped doing that as much, and so now it's revamping. What we've really had the conversation around and working with our new chief of human resources and talent is building intentional pipelines, specifically even with HBCUs that have teacher programs. Many of our schools, their teacher development programs, they don't have as many students going into the programs. A non-example for that is Miami University. So Miami's program is still one of the larger programs. Students are still going into the pipeline program. And in terms of recruitment, right now we do have the partnership with Miami, between Miami and Aiken, where the students are going in as a part of the pipeline. They just started the program. It launches the fall, and then they come back to us. But in terms of our recruitment has really been a lot of come to us versus us really. We do have a recruiter. The recruiters, we have two as a matter of fact, and they are working with identifying those individuals. We post our jobs. Primarily, we post on Indeed. But there are just so many more opportunities for that and other ways for us to engage. So I think we'll see. And the last thing I'll say to that is understanding that recruitment is twofold, because in many of the areas, as I look, it's not just a recruitment issue that we have, it's a retention issue that we have. So for as many teachers as we recruit, we lose. And so, we've already started and principals will share this with you, we've started some intentional work around the principal's role in what that looks like, because we can recruit the individuals and get them there. We have to work together as a school team to keep them there. So that means, what's happening for them at the school level? What are we doing as a district to support them? How are they feeling like they're a part of the organization? So it really becomes a more comprehensive conversation than just the recruitment piece, because the data that I see, that's exactly what it says, that it's not just recruitment, it's retention. And then from there, the next layer of that is how we're developing our own pipeline programs, and not just one pipeline program, but multiple pipeline programs, and doing that as well, that work with colleges and universities, and how we're looking at alternative certification as well, because that's another pipeline that I think is underutilized.
Do we have to, just curious to know, and I know because we're so large, probably would be very hard to do this, but do we ever do exit interviews? Like, not exit interviews, but gather exit information specifically for teachers?
So,
I mean,
so there is a request for the exit interview. It's also something that can be done electronically as well. Yes. I don't know how much we've actually focused on the responses from those exit interviews. Mm-hmm. So that's something for us to really look. I see Kendra from my periphery. She's shaking her head over here. I keep trying to focus this way, but I see Kendra but I don't. And again, this is based on the deep dive that I've been able to do since May the 2nd. And based on asking all of these questions, from where I sit, yes, we have it. Yes, it's an option, but what do we do with it? No different than the data that we collect from parents through a survey, through PASA. We can collect the survey, but it's only as good as the responses that we give, the feedback that we give, and what do we do to try to correct it.
Great. Well, just two more very short. But I happen to know a couple of parents who are part of the pipeline, and they are so excited about the opportunity. It is such a self-rewarding kind of thing for them to know that they can achieve higher and do something different. And so I'm really grateful for the opportunity for those parents who are interested in that. Secondly, and I'm looking at Julie, we were very excited about the new teacher ceremony and the program that occurred, and I was there for the first day to welcome them on behalf of the board. But got a lot of very positive feedback. The energy in that room was very good. And Julie, you were there all 3 days, and so I don't know how things went. Kendra, you were there too. I saw you there. And but they were, I didn't get. Now I don't know what they said to you, but I didn't get any. Maybe it's because I was a board member. They feel like they got to say the right thing, but I didn't get any negative comments. The energy there was good, and people shared in some cases where they were coming from, why they came back. A lot of them were people. Some of them have been in the district before,
Right.
and then left and then came back, and so that speaks to something too. So
Renewed energy.
yeah,
Renewed energy.
renewed energy. Yeah. So anyway, I said all that to say I was very pleased with the numbers that came of folks who were there, feeling like CPS was. That's all I will say about that.
Can I say one other thing? 'Cause
Sure.
I actually wanted to comment on the pipeline idea, because I actually think this is part of the thing that grows us in that next generation. Right? There are a lot of schools that have a wonderful sort of programs that oftentimes when we talk about diversifying our staff, diversifying our teachers, to really reflect the students that are in our district, that's part of how you do it, is you go to the places that they're at and talk to them in a space where they're at, not necessarily bring them to you, make them come to you. And so like in a lot of ways, I think that's part of the development that we can look forward to as we grow, is that the more these pipelines we have, the more these places that are saying, we want CPS to be the first place you go look at, the more likely we are to get better quality, but also a more diverse student body. And as we're talking about building equity within our schools, that's a large part of it. So I thought that's really great to hear.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Board Member Jones, I just want to acknowledge and give kudos to Candace Wang, Travis Raleigh, and the district-wide mentors. Brad Dillman was huge because they did make that welcoming for our new teachers, and those district-wide mentors are out there in the buildings continuing to facilitate and help them with getting acclimated. It's huge, and that's what keeps you in a district when you build those types of relationships.
Great. They did do a nice job. The coordination of it was great, and just people felt welcomed and appreciated.
Can I say one thing?
Yes.
In the past, we had programs, and it was with Miami University, but it was different than the program that Miami University currently has with Aiken. And through that, there were cohorts of teachers who were recruiting students in CPS. And I really think we can't wait until we find out who's in college to begin recruitment. I think we need to have a really strong program where we are working with high school students to help them go into the program, support them. Liz Jones, who is the CFT retiree chair, went through that Miami program, and they actually started doing some work when they were seniors in high school. And so if we could really work right now, universities are needing people in their education programs, and maybe we can help them to grow their program with our students and give them the support and the resources for that to happen. with some sort of incentives at the end, because our district needs our students, and the teachers who graduated from CPS are usually very good teachers and stay in CPS. And what I've seen over the years, we recruit people from out of state, and they stay until they get married or have children, and then they want to move home closer to their families because the grandparents want the kids closer to home. And so that's one of the things I think if we can do more for our kids, I think that would be beneficial for our district and our city.
Let me add one. I'll add to that. Thank you, Julie, for that. One of the things in terms of what I think what the board knows, and I don't know if everyone here actually knows, but one of the things that I've done as a part of meetings is met with all of our college presidents and the deans of the colleges since I've been here. And so in meeting with the president from Miami, for example, and the dean from the College of Education for Miami, that's exactly one of the conversations that we had. It's about, and this goes along with the conversation that I continue to have with the board around the focus on programming. Where are the gaps in what we're doing in terms of programming so that we then create the program that matches the need? And so while the program that is in the particular pipeline program that's at Aiken is only at Aiken, there is the desire, the focus, and the willingness for a concentration to spread that across the district so that it then becomes how we're refocusing and looking at pooling students together, generating excitement for them, creating excitement for them as a part of a primary teacher's college before you even transition into going to, your university. So that's where we're there. We're actually in the middle of those conversations. This is our new director, our senior director of instructional equity, and a part of that work is under her particular umbrella, but it's also work that she's been doing for the last how many years now? A lot of years. Now, who happens to be a Walnut grad, by the way, but that is coming back to Cincinnati at this point. But I share that because those are the kinds of things that we are already thinking about, so that as we move into next school year, we're moving into next school year with the lens of this is the need that we're looking to fill. This is the need that we have in terms of focus and areas for students. And this is the plan or the recommendation that we have for how to do that. And one of them definitely is building our own teacher pipeline.
Can you reintroduce our person here? And because I knew her face wasn't familiar, but yeah.
It might be. So you want to introduce yourself? Sure, go ahead.
They can't hear her.
Okay, well, I'll introduce you then, unless you want to come to them. I'll introduce her. Her name is Sarah Tierney. Sarah Tierney is a graduate of Walnut Hills. Is it 91? Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. She's a 93 graduate from Walnut Hills and is transitioning back with us as the senior director of one of the new roles that we have, which is instructional equity. And under the umbrella of instructional equity, as we think about equity and the board's focus overall on equity, equity becomes more than just what we think about in terms of funding and those kinds of things, but how we're thinking about the programs that are offered to students, what those programs look like, how we're giving access, and how we're thinking about access across the board. So in this particular role, within her team, you have, I know the other two call themselves the Wonder Twins, but maybe the Wonder Twins as we think about it, because one really focuses on the core.
Are they in this room?
These two, and then
Okay.
Butler and Smith call themselves the Wonder Twins as well. But in this role, in Emily Campbell's role, her role covers core, so English, math, science, social studies, instructional materials, integrated technology. So that's on one side. Everything else that has to do with instruction is in instructional equity, because those are the programs that you're looking for that K-12 space in terms of art, music, what we're doing around what's Montessori, gifted, ELL. So all of those programs are here, and aligned to that is the school programming work. And so how we're looking at we have a vacancy right now, but I think we've identified someone for the manager of school programs, because that's where you get into looking at the auditing of all of the school programs. Do we have a program that's actually a program, or is it still a program in name only? How we're canvassing and getting information from families and students around their level of interest, so that as we're looking at building moving forward, we're doing that from a lens of knowing what the interest is, what we're missing, and then how we fill those gaps for our families.
Thank you. I really appreciate the depth of this conversation. I think it's certainly a topic of high priority and interest. We want the best teachers, and I believe we have the best teachers. And I think just continually working on how we improve just where we want to be. So thank you. I don't know when we present the report to the full board. We only get 5 minutes for the committee report. So I don't know how I would capture that, but I'll do my best to make sure that we get the point of what has happened here. So I appreciate that.
There is strategy, there is focus. I think that's the way, strategy and focus. That's it.
Okay, and strategy and focus.
Yes.
Right there. Okay, thank you. So we have one more topic, and this is our Iowa test for Walnut Hills. Just sort of a prelude to that. This is a topic that comes up to me, and the way I see it, it comes up periodically. There's a period of time when we don't hear very much about it, and then either around the time of the test or when the letters go out that family may not be happy about or whatever, then we hear more about it. I believe we may have at least one person who is virtual who may want to comment on it, and we certainly want to hear from her. But I first want to say that the three of us who comprise this committee have never really fully understood the process. And so part of what we want to do today with the presentation is help to better understand the actual process of the testing, why we do it, what happens in that process, and the process for how we notify students and families. But then secondly, I believe one of the areas of interest that was expressed by maybe the person who is virtual is on the impact of COVID on the eligibility determination. That's why I wanted the superintendent to stay in case you wanted to have some input into that. So I'm going to be quiet, but I just kind of wanted to set the stage for that conversation, and but looking forward to hearing more about the process itself.
So just so that we'll know this part of it. So I asked Amanda to attend this meeting so that she could talk specifically about the Iowa assessment and why we use that assessment.
Exactly. Yes.
Shauna would be, Ms. Murphy would be able to answer the enrollment part of the question, and then we will route into the numbers of students that we had that, in that range that did or did not get accepted based on the range for the school, if that's fine.
Thank you.
Okay.
So the one pager you have in front of you really speaks to the why we use the Iowa assessment as our Walnut entrance exam. So it was actually chosen as part of a larger RFP process that happened in 2019. Prior to the Iowa assessment, we used the Terra Nova assessment, and at the time of the RFP, it had not been normed in a very long time, I think almost a decade at that point. And so that was one of the main reasons a different assessment was chosen at that point, was because it hadn't been normed in a while. So the RFP committee selected the Iowa assessments. They serve as both a gifted assessment, identifying assessment in our district, as well as the Walnut Hills entrance exam. So the current process for testing for entrance into Walnut, we call this, sometimes it's referred to as the SCPP test, the Special College Preparatory Test. So we're kind of rebranding it back to Walnut, the Walnut Hills entrance exam, because it's the only program that the test is used for right now. But students take the Iowa reading portion of the test and the Iowa vocab portion of the test, and then those are combined to get a reading total. They take the Iowa math test and then the Iowa computation test, and then those are combined to get a math total. And so to qualify for entrance into Walnut Hills, you have to score in the 65th percentile for a reading total, 65th percentile for a math total, and then when you add those two together, it has to be at least a 140. So for our students, all CPS 6th graders take those tests in school in the fall to see if they qualify for entrance into Walnut Hills High School. And then if the students are out of district or in grades 7 through 11, they can sign up for one of 4 Saturday testing sessions in which those same assessments are administered to students during a Saturday testing session. Students can test up to twice in a school year. So any student who does not make the qualifying scores and would like to retest, they test during one of those Saturday testing sessions, including our CPS 6th graders. So we use the Iowa assessment specifically because it meets some of the criteria. So it is a nationally normed assessment, is an achievement assessment for reading and math. It's a non-adaptive test, which is really important because that means it can be given paper and pencil, which is really essential for those Saturday testing sessions. We can have upwards of 500 kids sometimes, and devices, those are non-CPS kids, login, internet issues, those are things that would be extreme barriers to try to do some sort of adaptive test, online test during one of those Saturday testing sessions. It's a timed assessment, also essential for Saturday testing sessions, so we can actually proctor the tests in a set time period. And then it's appropriate for students who receive any accommodations. We can meet accommodations according to any student's IEP, 504, or LEP plan. So that's kind of the why. We are going through an RFP process this coming school year, which will include the Iowa assessment. So this is something that we could potentially be looking at. And we are just starting the beginning stages of planning for that RFP process going into the 23-24 school year. So it could remain Iowa, could end up shifting depending on how that RFP process goes.
Okay. And that was going to be anything else to add?
That is all I have for you.
Okay, before we ask Ms. Murphy to update us on the enrollment process. So I just want to be clear, and for the sake of our audience, this is the Iowa was implemented in 2019 as a part of an RFP process.
Correct.
So it wasn't like state mandated or anything. We selected, the district selected the provider of this particular test.
Correct.
Okay. And the reason for us switching at that time was?
So I was not part of the department at that time, full disclosure. But they just, there was a myriad of factors that went into the RFP process. There was a rubric they used, but one of the reasons that that they moved away, that I know that previous assessment was not selected, was concern around it had not been nationally normed in a very long time.
Okay.
And so there was concern about the validity of the results.
Okay.
So if I could add in here, so a couple of things. So when we think about testing, we're thinking about whether or not a test is a norm reference test, whether it's a criterion reference test, whether it is a test that is diagnostic and prescriptive. So essentially that means that as a student begins to take the test then changes based on how they respond to the test. So with what I know about Iowa, and more than likely one of the reasons that it was selected is because it is a test that is a nationally recognized test, and it's a norm reference assessment. That's one. The second is it is an assessment that it is a state approved assessment for qualifying for gifted for our state. So if we think about what we're looking at for students that are going into the Walnut Hills program, the reason we give the Iowa is twofold. And one of the recommendations even that we did this year in changing one of the assessments for students, for our younger students that were really, really being over-tested, was to go to the Iowa because of that very reason. So that if students are identified, if it's an identifier for gifted, and it's a test that we're using that's also a norm reference assessment, then it's one that becomes more consistent in terms of the process. I think where the question comes in is there are recommendations that connect with the types of levels of proficiency when you think about giftedness. And so when you go to a number like a 65%, that's essentially saying that the students on that assessment scored, better than 65% of the other students that are on the test. So it gives you some level of indicator of how they will perform moving forward. So I do believe, based on what I know about the assessment, and knowing that we changed in 2019 for the purpose of congruency, that was more than likely one of the reasons that was done at that time and why we went to this particular assessment.
Okay. And do we test for Spencer?
We use the same assessment.
Okay.
And so it's across the board.
Okay.
And it's across the board though, which is also something that's important because this assessment is the qualifying assessment, as an assessment that can be used as a gifted qualifying assessment.
Gotcha. Okay.
It is not the only one, but it is
Right.
Okay.
our primary use.
Okay. All righty. Did you have any questions for Ms. Ryder?
No, I mean, I just would say I think one of the things that I have heard in the understanding the process with regard to the test is really just the communication that we as a district do out to the parents about the test. I think, again, there's another aspect with regards to whether or not students who were kind of stuck in that year of COVID, how they performed on the test. And I think that's a whole separate question as to whether or not additional resources we can always work out with them and that kind of deal. But I think really understanding how the test works is a big part of, for a lot of parents that just didn't know. Right. And so what I think that's one of the things we've talked about since Superintendent Wright has joined us in the district, is that a lot of efforts for us to communicate clearer, not necessarily more, but just clearer with folks about how all the things work and operate.
I think the one more thing before Ms. Murphy shares as well, I think in this particular question, one of the things that happened because of COVID, there was a change in the acceptance of the cutoff score that was used for students to get into Walnut. And the recommendation, as I've talked to the team, was at that time to reduce what that score was to allow that population into Walnut, to try to address the fact that there was the concern from COVID. So, but it was to go back to the regular assessment for this year. And so that's what happened. Mm-hmm. Now, in terms of how it was communicated, to your point, other than I know that it's been communicated through the school, there was some information that was on the website, but how, really how effective that was, I'm not sure. But I think that that's been the difference. And so we do have some that would have made the cutoff had we used the cutoff score from last year, but the cutoff score that was used for last year is significantly lower than what the general score has been since 2019. And so that's just another area. And I know Ms. Murphy can talk a bit more to that, but that's really where I think the difference is.
I would simply like to add that once those students have tested and they meet the qualifying scores that Mrs. Vargo referred to, we do communicate with them in writing what their score is and what their next step is. That's usually the latter part of the fall. We do ask them by December to let us know if you're going to accept this placement at Walnut Hills, so that if there are other students who might be interested outside of our district, there may be a space available. But we do work hard to serve our students first. Sometimes our kids choose our Montessori programs as opposed to going into Walnut Hills, and then we want to know what those numbers are.
If I could add one more piece before we go to other questions. So the other thing that I think is really important is there's the math portion and there's the reading portion. And the minimum score is the 65th percentile for both of them. So sometimes when we hear, well, they missed it by just this much, there is a reading score, there's a math score, and then there is a minimum score overall. So as long as they meet the 65th percentile and they meet the minimum score, it doesn't matter if the math is higher or if the reading is higher. They just collectively, that composite score, there's one composite score that's used for that. And I think that score is 140. Correct.
Okay, I just want to add, and I'm sort of following Mr. Craig's lead on this, around oftentimes by the time people communicate to us, it is mainly because they either received a letter that says their child didn't get accepted, or they may have some general questions about the process. And we're not the folks, the board is not the folks who can really respond to that specifically, which is why we try to redirect them to the appropriate person. I do want to reiterate what Mr. Craig says is what is communicated makes all the difference in the world. And if it is that they did not get in, I think I would encourage us to just really, as much as possible, to have one-on-one conversations with families instead of like a blanket letter or something, but maybe one-on-one, because you know how it is. People want what they want. And if they feel like if they want their kid in Walnut, they want their kid in Walnut. If they didn't get in Walnut, they need to know specifically why. And just like it's being explained to us here about there's a cutoff and this is what happens and all of that, I think they need to know that at times. The whole issue with COVID, I think, is a different dynamic, and I'm glad you addressed this, Superintendent, in terms of where we are with COVID. We made a lot of adjustments in COVID. We did. And now to say we should just make it a permanent change, I don't know that that's even realistic to do that. I mean, we have to move beyond COVID. Let's just acknowledge that. But I think that the point of we did modify that at that particular time, that kids were actually admitted as a result of the COVID situation. Is that what I'm understanding?
So I understand the score during the COVID as a follow-up to COVID was 110. Is that right?
It was a minimum of 50, 50, and 110. Yes.
Okay, so
Okay.
so 50, 50, and 110.
Okay.
So if you think about it, that's from the 50th percentile to the 65th percentile is a bit of a difference. And then from 110 overall to 140 overall, gives that difference as well in terms of the points. So I think so some of the individuals that we've heard from recently have, requested that we go back to where we were before, which would have then allowed them to qualify to get in. But that tells you what those numbers are in terms of the differences.
So how about let's ask Ms. Murphy if you want to update us further on the enrollment process a little bit, and there may generate some additional questions around it too. And for the sake of the audience, do you know how many people are on there? One, and it may be the person. I want to make sure that she gets an opportunity to comment on this particular, and we do have a little bit of time. We don't have a lot of time. About
12 minutes.
We're going to get out by 3:30. Okay.
I can be very brief. So after the family receives a letter of acceptance, then they would go to our online portal to complete the registration, and the school accepts them and pulls them in. And then after that, the school continues their process for first day, orientation, etc.
Okay. I guess I'm gathering that the enrollment process is fairly straightforward. They get a letter, they have a timeline in which they're to let us know.
Yes.
And then they are advised to go to the portal to complete the information. And then at some point, if they've done that, fine, they get a letter or something, some kind of communication. And then for those who don't follow through with that, they also get a letter or communication.
So they need to let us know if they're going to accept. If they don't accept it, then generally speaking, what happens in the high school lottery is they have enrolled, registered for another school, made a selection of another school, and then that's how we know.
Okay. So my question, and then we can open it up to the public comment, for the out-of-district students that apply and or accepted, their admittance to the program is based on the priority list?
It's contingent upon space available, first of all.
All right.
Contingent upon space available, and then it even drills down to by grade level.
Gotcha.
So it could be very specific.
But what we accept each year, and so I did ask the team I know eventually we're going to have a larger conversation. I did ask the team to cross-reference the numbers for the enrollments into Walnut and whether they're in-district students or out-of-district students. And each year it's about 220 students. So regardless to where they are and what grade level they are, that number is pretty consistent. We pulled data for the last 5 years. And so it may even be 6, but the number it's about 220 students.
220 students
from outside of the district. Mm-hmm.
And are those, and pardon me for not knowing the policy verbatim, but it's been 3 years since I've been on policy committee. So we give priority to kids who live in the city proper.
Absolutely.
Before we open it up to out of
Absolutely.
district. Okay. Anything else, Ms. Murphy, on that? Okay. If we can check with do we have the person online? And if the person what do I need to tell them?
Just Jennifer Harden to accept the invite.
Ms. Harden, if you could accept the invite.
I accepted her request.
We'll accept the request.
Should be.
Okay.
Takes a couple minutes.
Ms. Harden? Are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
We can. Thank you. Thank you for
Okay.
joining. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, I know that we have a room full of people, and hopefully you heard this discussion on the Iowa test. I know you were very interested in this subject, and so wanted to offer you the opportunity to make your comment while folks are here. And we have about 10 minutes. So if we need to have an opportunity to respond, we can do that. So I'll let you go ahead and make your comments or ask your question.
Thank you so much. I don't have any prepared comments. I've been communicating a lot with the administration and some of the board members, as you know. Really appreciate you giving me this opportunity to speak to this committee. I just wanted to appeal to the committee to think about modifying back to last year's qualifications for the SCPP Walnut Hills entrance exam based on the effects of COVID. So last year, the testing was modified as noted, 50 percentile, 50-50 for math and reading, and 110 overall score. I just would like the committee to take that under consideration again for this year. I apologize for this request coming so late. Of course, I would have done it earlier if I really realized that that this was even a possibility. But I would argue also, and I've put this in several emails, is that the 2022 sixth grade graduating class was more affected by COVID than actually the 2021 sixth grade graduating class. I've talked to, and I don't have the data, but I've talked to teachers and parents, and I've just heard rumors that 30% of the children were not accepted into Walnut Hills this year. I don't know what it was last year or compared to 2019. I don't have that data, but I've just heard that there are a lot of students that did not pass the exam and or weren't eligible for Walnut Hills based on their scores. So I would just ask that this committee take that into consideration. These children that were graduating sixth grade, not only my student, but a lot of other students in several different schools. I have a friend that teaches at Dater, and she said only a handful of their students also were able to score high enough to get into Walnut Hills. So I would ask that, I think there's going to be a lot of parents that choose to take their kids out of the district, and me included. Walnut Hills is my first preference, and I think my student is well qualified to get in there. I think that he did fall behind. With COVID, he not only experienced that shutdown in 2020, but he went through that whole year or 3/4 of the year doing remote learning. So it has impacted our students, not only my student, but a lot of sixth grade students. The other problem where I'm having is that, I specifically went to Landon's teacher, and I asked her at the end of 2021 at my parent-teacher conference, I specifically asked her, is there anything I can do? I'm a little bit worried because of COVID, how he's going to do on this test. I know he's got to take it in the fall. And she specifically, said, no, Landon's not going to have a problem. No problem. Don't worry about it. So I even said, I'm willing to get him tutoring, whatever needs to be. And I say that because I used to live outside of the district. I purposely moved back into the district 10 years ago because I value CPS and I value the diversity and the equity and the inclusion that this system offers our students. So I moved back into the district so that I could send him to North Avondale because I knew many of his cousins had graduated from North Avondale and were able to get a score for the Walnut Hills test. So I just thought he would do that. Now, some of our other schools, for example, Clark is where he would have normally gone. It's so full because I'm assuming that a lot of kids didn't pass the Walnut Hills test, that a lot of them are going to Clark. And so now it's so full that he's on a waiting list for Clark.
Okay, Ms. Harden?
Yeah.
I do want, I don't want to cut you off. I think
That's okay.
are getting, your point very clearly. Just in the communication that I had with you, certainly, and hopefully, maybe what we need is to, if you want to talk to someone more directly, I think that would be appropriate to explain, because we did, I don't know if you heard the conversation, but we did talk a bit about the COVID piece.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that this committee at this time can give you sort of a direct response right now as to whether or not we can do it, which is why I had said in my communication, this is a bigger concern. So
Sure.
give us an opportunity to kind of digest and process and figure out a next step. And that next step may be to talk with you about kind of what your concerns are on a broader level. So if you're okay with that, we just wanted to make sure you had an opportunity to express your concern.
Yes, thank you. And thank you so much for your leadership. I really appreciate you listening to me and taking this under consideration. I do understand the process, and thank you for going over it today. I have learned more about the process since I've really started investigating this. The other piece is that I know that this is coming late in the year, but I didn't really know that there was even an opportunity to ask the administration and the board until June that there might be that possibility. So I know school starts on the 18th, which doesn't give us very much time. And I am advocating specifically for my student, but I also think this affects a larger population of all of our graduating 6th grade students and entering 7th grade. So I'm not just saying it's just for my student, but I think it's going to affect the school district overall. There's going to be a lot of parents that are going to be leaving the district if they don't see if they can get their child into a college preparatory leaning school.
Okay. Well, we thank you again for your time. And again, I think at this point, we're going to recommend as a committee that we might want to have someone reach out, have a more direct conversation. I do think that I believe definitely that folks on this committee understand what you're asking. But in terms of us figuring out next steps around this or a decision or whatever, but whatever is decided, I think we owe you at least a call back to communicate with you. So we'll do that. And we thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you. Did you get the recommendation from Dr. Spencer?
Yes.
I did not.
I did.
Yes. Did I get it?
I got it.
You got
Yeah,
it.
because it comes from administration. I
Yeah.
think the response is that also we appreciate the information to the committee, but ultimately the administration, whether that's the principal or whether that's someone from my team, actually will do the follow up because that's where the next steps come from. So we did get that information. Thank you very much.
And when can I expect that?
We'll have someone follow up with you next week.
Okay. Thank you, Superintendent
You're
Wright.
welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Rob, do we have anybody else? Okay. The final item on the agenda is other business. I think we've covered a lot today. I feel drained.
Good stuff.
This was good conversation, though. Any other business, further business? And everybody hung in there. Nobody left. All right. Thank you. Thank you again. I say congratulations, but oh, I'm sorry, Kendra. You did have a comment.
I made my.
You made your comment. Great. I'm sorry. Thank you. All right. Well, having no other business, meeting is adjourned. Have a good week.
Thank you.
Thank you. You too.
Hey, try.